I feel like if one party or the other had complete control, like governor, House, Senate in the state, they could also probably do a whole bunch of stuff, especially August 4th, if they're allowed to purchase our Supreme Court justices, right? They'd be able to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that would then have to be fought to the Supreme Court and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and of course I have that unusual background where I am an attorney and I have voted on nominating committees while I lived in Kansas. So there was a brief time when I was still licensed in Kansas, but lived in Florida, and a brief time that I lived in Missouri. But I've lived in Liberal, I've lived in Eudora, I've lived in Johnson County, I've lived in Leavenworth County, and each time you get an opportunity when there's an opening on the nominating committee to vote. And I've never belonged to the Kansas Bar Association. And so there's a lot of misinformation about that the Bar Association controls it. And that is a misnomer. Yes, I am a member of the bar. I am not a member of the Bar Association. And then I've seen people argue that the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association is super liberal. That may be, but I'm also not a member of the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association. There's only a very limited number of people that are in the state, the trial lawyers. It's such a weird piece of information that's being distributed about this particular issue. And the folks that are on the nominating committee, again, I feel like they think that there's some secret process here, but there's not. Everybody who's in a congressional district gets a ballot, and we vote on the nominating committee. The lawyers do. We vote on the nominating committee, so they should reflect the demographics of each congressional district, because they don't send it to me because I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or whatever. They send it to me because I'm a licensed attorney. They don't send it to me because I'm a member of the Kansas Bar Association, because I'm not. And so I just don't understand the concept behind it's the Bar Association that controls it, or the information that's coming out about that. It doesn't track with the way that it really works.
Yeah, I think that there was a reason we switched to this. I think that the people voted to switch to this, and we've been doing it since 1958. And then there's this statistic they like to use that 80% of the cases that the Supreme Court overturns them. That's just how they say it. When in reality, I'm not sure the number that have been attempted to get in front of the Supreme Court, because they have heard 9. And yes, of those 9, 80% were overturned. But I don't know. I haven't looked up the stats to see how many were not even heard by the Supreme Court.
And it's a lot. The Supreme Court hears very little of the cases that are, and you also have to understand that to appeal a case to the Supreme Court, you've already expended an enormous amount of money to get there, except for in criminal cases where the counsel may be appointed. But even the decision to appeal to the Supreme Court is very small. And then the number of cases the Supreme Court takes is incredibly small. And the Supreme Court most of the time takes cases that they know that they aren't going to agree with the outcome. There's a decision process that the Supreme Court has, the United States Supreme Court, where they talk about those cases and what they want to accept. And so it's easy to convolute the data to make it say what you want to say. And the reality is, our system was picked because there was a bit of a weird situation that happened in the 50s. And so we picked a much better situation.
Yeah, I think, and then you do get a vote still.
Right, a retention vote right away. If we elect them, it's 6 years. If they aren't good, if they don't do whatever it is that you ask them to run on, it's 6 years before you get to vote them out, as opposed to it's 1 year and then you get a retention vote, and then you get that retention vote every 6 years. So it's a strange.
So if they really truly cared about getting out the radical judges, they would just push to people in that first year to vote them out. So I think it's so obvious to me. And then for me, it's so strange that on one hand, they try to say that the electorate in Kansas is so easily duped, they could be tricked into voting in 2022 about abortion. So that's what they're saying. They're saying, oh, the Democrats put out misinformation and said it was an abortion ban, and people just didn't understand. And then I wasn't here, but I looked it up and I was like, what I'm reading before I vote sounds pretty clear to me. I don't know what was said at the time because I wasn't living here, but what I'm reading is plain, clear English to me. I know exactly what I'm voting about. And so on one hand, the people of Kansas are easily duped by the Democrats, who are completely not even in control somehow. And then, but on the other hand, they are then qualified enough to select Supreme Court justices.
Which is a strange thing in any case, because as a judge, the rules of ethics say I will not prejudge cases. And so we're saying that we vote in the right judges, we're going to get the response that we want, whether that's banning abortion or whatever. We see the same thing is happening in Missouri, where they had a ballot amendment as well. And there's just an inability to accept what the outcome was of those elections.
Yeah, we know where that comes from. Yeah, I got into it on Facebook with a guy. I got into it because Kansas Helen doesn't really get into things. I stay professional, but we were going back and forth in the comment section, and he understood their exact plan. He talked about how we got personhood in the laws now. Like, basically we have chipped away at it. And so this is the last step to banning abortion. And then his argument was that the Democrats in 2022 lied, saying that if you voted for it, you were voting to ban abortion. And I said, yes, technically we're voting on whether the legislature could ban abortion, but we all knew, everybody knew that if it passed the very next session, they were banning abortion. So really you were voting whether you wanted abortion banned or not. That's not what it said, but that's what everybody knew you were voting on. And so to say that I feel like I would feel insulted by the argument that I was too stupid to know what I was voting on.
Yeah, I agree. It's trying to get to an end, however we can get to the end without really believing in the democracy that we now have at the top of those signs.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate because ultimately I do not think that someone the likes of Ty Masterson or whatever really cares about any of this. They don't really care. They figured out a long time ago that they can rile up their base over one or two topics and keep them voting. People have admitted over and over they vote on this one topic because if you look at their side of things, and I've tried to explain this to my liberal and Democrat and left friends, because I used to be super, super religious and I grew up in that, they literally think you're killing a baby. Do you know what I mean? And so if I truly believed you were killing a baby, yeah, I would probably want to fight against that too. But the thing is that the people at the top making the decisions, they know. They don't really believe that. And they know that it's just a way to get people to vote for them against their own best interest. It's one of those things that I will never understand why it's even a topic of discussion in the state house. Why trans people are even a topic of discussion in the state house when we have so many more important things. Even if the trans people thing is an issue, whatever, it's such a small amount of people. We just have so many bigger things to get to right now. And I think that I've talked to several Republicans that are running, and then Republican voters and stuff online they're starting to feel that way too. They're like, yes, I agree with them about trans people, but at the same time, I can't eat, you know what I mean?